Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our panel session, Are Men and Women Leading the Same Way? Capitalizing on Gender Differences. We are currently in the Women of Color STEM DTX platform. This platform can be accessed all year round with different activities, events such as the summit. We are also streaming live in the Metaverse STEM City, USA. If you have questions during the presentation, you can scan the QR code at the bottom of your screen. Your questions may be selected to be put on screen. At the end of the seminar, if you have any further question, please join us in the breakout session located in the Women of Color Information Center. You will get a chance to meet and network with speakers. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jermaine Stanley, and I am your moderator today. I am also the CEO and founder of Stanley Consulting Group. I am an information technology risk, governance, compliance, and cybersecurity leader with more than 25 years experience working in different industries, including financial, healthcare, telecom, and government. I am a passionate leader with a reputation of building teams, mentoring, and a passion for creating diverse and inclusive cultures. I strive to grow with my clients to help them build, launch, and lead initiatives that promote DEI within their organizations. We're fortunate today to have senior leaders who you'll get to meet soon who are responsible for and or can provide insight regarding capitalizing on gender differences across large global organizations. I'm going to start by introducing Ms. Beth Howe, after which she and our panelists will briefly tell you about themselves. Ms. Howe will then share how today's session will be arranged. Over to you, Mrs. Howe.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stanley. Greatly appreciated. Greetings, everyone. I want to thank Career Communications Group and the Women of Color Conference for inviting me to present at STEM City, USA. It's great to be here today. I also want to thank our moderator and our panelists and our attendees for joining us, for giving us some of your time today. I am a co-team lead and co-author for United Nations Sustainable Development Goals Corporate Guidebook, SDG 8. SDG 8 pertains to decent work and economic growth. The work is done through Sherpa Institute, which is a think tank. I'm also a co-author for Many Hearts. Many Hearts, a story of global friendship, The Godfident Woman, and Complicated Alliances. All three bestsellers are about women supporting other women, women's empowerment, raising up and empowering each other. I focus on consulting for citizen diplomacy, strategic planning, human resources, corporate social responsibility, and environmental, social, and governance considerations. I'm a strong supporter of human rights, which includes gender equality. With an MBA from the University of New Mexico, much of my career has been spent primarily in high-tech defense environments, but also nonprofits. Over to you, Ms. Judd.
Thanks, Beth. I'll keep it short and sweet. My name is Salma Jett, and I've had a career in the life sciences for 24 years in mostly sales and marketing leadership roles. I've been in medical devices, med tech, digital health or connected care, and pharmaceuticals. Currently, I'm the Vice President of Sales for the U.S. Ethicon business. That's a surgical business at Johnson & Johnson. My focus is always on growth, really growth of the people that are on my team and the people that I interact with, as well as growth of the business. And that's what I'm focused on every day. Thank you.
And I'm Matt Moon. I'm delivery manager for Actilent, which is an engineering and sciences services and talent solutions company. I'm a utilities and telecom engineering consultant with degrees in business administration and electrical engineering from Ohio State. And I spent 22 years as a telecom engineer for one of the country's major electric utility companies and 8 years ago joined Actilent and started a telecom engineering practice there by hiring, teaching, coaching, and mentoring a lot of very talented engineers. That telecom team is now 150 strong and delivering engineering services to major electric utility companies. And back to you, Beth.
Thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's information. Thank you for sharing it with us. Now, audience members, thank you again for joining us today. Today's discussion will afford you unique insight into capitalizing on gender differences. You've seen our panelist here, and let's see our learning objective today. Explore the gender differences in leadership styles that increase productivity. What we're going to do today is share insights into our experiences and expertise in capitalizing on gender differences. We're going to start with some high-level insights. And I want to remind everybody that QR code on your screen. If you have any questions, please go ahead and click that. And that's where you'll be able to put your questions for us to answer at a later time. What I want to do is start with human rights. When I speak about gender, I start with human rights, basic human rights. All of humanity should be treated humanely and have an opportunity in our global landscape. Now, when we talk about gender, today, our slide title, title slide said, are men and women leading differently? When it comes to gender, gender means many different things. You can have 2 genders, 50 genders, or 100 or more, depending on whatever list you source. What I want you to do, no matter what your background is, what your beliefs are, remember we're talking about the workplace. We're talking about human rights within the workplace, how we treat other people. Whenever somebody says, this is my gender, then that is who they are, that is what they feel, that is what they believe, and it's a matter of respect. Gender doesn't have anything to do with how somebody may or may not be able to do their work. It is a part of who they are, and being able to be who they are is what will make them more productive in your workplace. For the purpose of our discussion, let's keep in mind that we're talking about capitalizing on gender differences in leadership. What I want you to do is think about, where do we get stereotypes? Where do biases come in? Is gender really making the difference? Or is it just our perception? What I want to do now is take you to some data. I'm a data person. I'm not quite sure what's going on with the slide here, but that's all right. This is from McKinsey, Women in the Workplace. This is actually from 2021. I looked to see if the 2022 data was out, but it's not out yet. What I want you to look at on this slide is, this is a snapshot of Women in the Workplace 2021. This study's been done a number of years by McKinsey and Company. It's in partnership with leanin.org. This was the 7th year for this particular study. The data reflects 423 participating organizations employing 12 million people with more than 65,000 surveyed. While I pulled the snapshot, you can download the entire report at mckinsey.com. Now let's talk about what this chart is showing us. It appears to show differences in, would we say, compassion levels, which at a first glance, leads us to believe that women are more compassionate. Does it truly reflect a difference in leadership based on gender? Again, think about perceptions. The scenario is playing out along gender lines. However, I suggest we examine whether or not gender is actually making the difference in leadership, or if it's the training, the education, the upbringing, societal expectations, stereotypes, or our own biases that we have that are making the difference. Now, when I use the word bias, hey, we all have it. If you woke up this morning, you're a human being, you are biased. It's all of that stuff that we grew up with, everything we heard, even if we know at a conscious level what is right, what is wrong, we still have a bias, and it's based on everything that's been presented to us throughout our lives. So the key is to be aware of it. doesn't make you a bad person. What makes you a better person is to be able to understand I'm biased, you're biased, and just remember that in our conversations and in our decision making. Now, as we go through the session today, I'm going to ask you again to please put your questions in, use that QR code. We'll answer them time permitting, and we're also going to have a Q&A at the end. Otherwise, we'll join you later, right after this session, to answer any questions that you might have. At the end of this seminar, participants are going to be able to examine the main gender differences in terms of leadership. Again, I ask you to open your mind. Whatever you think about gender, open it. All genders across the board, however anybody identifies. 2, identify criteria to support a comparative analysis. 3, discuss potential barriers that affect performance. And 4, ascertain methods for improving organizational performance through a better leadership style. Now we're going to start asking some questions here. And our first question is going to go to Ms. Jett. Selma, if you would, I want you to provide your insight into the main gender differences in terms of leadership.
Thanks, Beth. You covered so many important points in your setup, and it really leads me to ask the question of the controversial maybe question of why do we even look for differences? Why are there differences? If they exist, why do they exist? And should we really be analyzing differences? Shouldn't it just be about situational leadership and matching an individual's skill set to the situation? And the problem solving that's needed, the leadership that's needed have that happen regardless of gender. Ultimately, I think it should be about the business, the needs of the business, the needs of the people, and a leader that has a skill set that can flex and provide that. However, that just isn't our reality because fundamentally there's just more men in leadership positions than there are women in leadership positions, which is ultimately the reason why we have a discussion topic like the one we've got today. I know that there's so many companies, and more so now in the last few years than ever before, that are working hard to bring balance to that. I work for J&J, and women in leadership is a very strong focus for J&J across all the operating companies that make up J&J. And that balance is important, and bringing balance, that's kind of what causes us to have topics like we have today, where we're making comparisons, or we're analyzing comparisons. And they're hard to do because if we assign traits to a gender, what ends up happening is we put many women potentially in a position of needing to act like men from a stereotypical standpoint. The men that they see in those roles that they aspire to be in, and the typical behaviors that they've maybe seen and experienced in their careers. And the strange thing is that unconscious bias that you spoke to, that we all have, when women are aggressive or direct or competitive or strategic, they are not always viewed as favorably as men with those same traits. I know I've experienced that directly throughout my career. And so it just leads me to challenge us all to, instead of comparing traits of the leader based on gender, we need to match and develop traits of a leader based on the situation and based on the people. So overall, I'd encourage all of us to not look for differences in how men versus women lead, and instead spend our time and energy and work on eliminating why and how we perceive their leadership differently based on their gender. Back to you, Beth.
Thank you very much, Selma. I really appreciate that, especially one thing that you said that really stood out for me. And it goes back to when a man says something in a certain way, a male says something in a certain way, it's viewed as assertive. Sometimes when a woman says it becomes aggressive. She's aggressive, she's mean, she's whatever. What I want you to do is remember that word I used earlier, bias. The next time in your workplace or your life or wherever, and you think that a woman is being aggressive, ask yourself this. If a man said the same thing in the same tone, the same way, how would I take it? Would I say he's being aggressive? Would I say he's being assertive? Just think about that. Just take a moment and reflect on that. Because the reality is sometimes women do, we've been taught, hey, this is what you have to do to get ahead. This is how you have to act. So sometimes we become, really tough-like in the workplace. And people will sometimes interpret that as being aggressive. When really, if it was a man doing it, it would be considered assertive. Think about that. Just the next time you have an interaction in the workplace, ask yourself, if a male said the same thing the same way, would I say he's being aggressive, or would I say, oh, he's firm, but I know where I stand with him, so I like that. Just think about it. All right. Next, we're going to hear from Jermaine Stanley on the main differences in terms of leadership. Jermaine, over to you. Jermaine, you're on mute.
My apologies. Thank you, Beth. And, we got to check those biases, right? So I appreciate that. And Selma, thank you very much. Before I answer that question, I think it's important that we differentiate between gender equality and gender equity. And we're talking mostly about equity here, but equality sometimes gets thrown in the mix, but they're not the same. So the differences is this: equality, or gender equality in this case, is simply focused on providing women and men the same or equal opportunities, like making it possible for all women to apply for leadership opportunities. Whereas gender equity works to correct those historical wrongs that have left women behind, such as restrictions on employment and promotions. Gender equity, the key because it means that women will have the tools to succeed. I think that's a smart move if you're a leader. Think about that. And then, let me also add that when we talk diversity, equity, and inclusion, it starts with leadership, because leadership has to walk this walk. They can't just check the boxes. So you have to go a little deeper into these things, right? And, it has to be an ethos, it has to be a mantra, it has to be something that your culture will absorb within your organization. It takes on the persona. So in response to the question, in my opinion, I'll respond this way. I feel that more gender equity in the workplace and our society is needed. The pandemic disproportionately displaced more women from the global workforce compared to men. There are studies on this, so check that out. To the tune of about 54 million people worldwide. That is a lot of people. The gap between men and women in the workforce has widened during the pandemic and will take more than 100 years to close. And I believe that number is around 127 years to be exact. That's a significant negative impact on gender parity among men and women in the workplace. In other words, as my fellow panelists have already discussed, gender equity was already in bad shape before the pandemic, and now it's worse. So I hope that resonates with you, and think about that as you go back to your day-to-day. Back to you, Ms. Howell.
Thank you so much, Mr. Stanley. I really appreciate that. I want to highlight a couple of things that you said that really resonated with me. Equity and equality. These are two buzzwords. We hear them all the time. They are not the same thing. Now, we've all seen probably that there's a picture of three little kids looking over a fence, maybe at a baseball game or something else. They're all looking over the fence. You have one who is, his whole head is above the fence, so he has a clear view. You have the next one standing beside him. Well, he can't really see over the fence. He's not really getting a good view. He's not tall enough. Then you have the next one who there's no way he can see over the fence. The only hope he has is if there's a hole in the fence, because he's shorter than the other two individuals there. Now, you say equality. Let's give them all a box to stand on. Well, the first guy could see over the fence to begin with. He didn't need the box. Equity is when you look at the number of boxes you have and you say, okay, the person who can't see at all maybe needs 2 boxes to stand on. That way he can see over the fence. The person in the middle, person could just, maybe the top of his head was over the fence, but he couldn't really see. Give him 1 box. That way, hey, now he's got a clear view. And the person who was tall enough to see over the fence at the beginning doesn't need a box at all. I think we've all seen that. You can Google it, look it up. It's a very quick, easy concept to grasp when you see something put that way. Again, there's a difference between equity and equality. Equality means, hey, I give everybody, gave everybody the same thing, but did it have the same impact? That's where equity comes in. So Jermaine, thank you very much for sharing that information with us. And another thing that really resonated with me is you talk about data. Everybody, data is out there. There's a book called Factfulness. I personally think it should be mandatory reading for 6th grade and up. If you haven't read it, pick it up. It's a quick, easy read. It's by Hans Rosling. Very insightful book. It talks about how data is out there. But, if we look at, what our teachers taught us maybe in school, depends on if they had any updates to that information they got when they were in school as to whether or not that information is accurate today. So what statistics are you looking at? Where are you getting them from? I tend to look to the UN. I look to the World Bank. There are different places to get today's data. And what you're looking at makes a difference in the picture that's painted based on that data. So again, thank you very much, Jermaine. I really appreciate the insights that you bring. Now, what I'd like to do is go back to Ms. Jutt. What I'd like for you to do is share with our audience today how they might identify criteria to support a comparative analysis.
It's a great question. I go back a little bit to what I said earlier, which is if you're looking for data, if you're looking to do an analysis, it shouldn't be based on gender. I'd rather see us focus on analyzing different situations that required leadership, situations that needed transition management, change agents, the great resignation, retention, mergers, divestitures, highs and lows of a business, growth amongst entrepreneurs versus large corporations, different industries. Let's mine all of those examples and determine the traits of the strongest leaders that led through those situations. And then let's look at the demographics of those leaders. I'm pretty sure our discussion, it'll end up not really on the comparison of women versus men, but what we might see is ourselves going back to the fundamental issue of why are there so few women in those situations versus men? And how do we correct that? So gender actually becomes the fallout of that discussion, where the problem that's highlighted is we don't have enough women in those roles. And it's not about the traits they may have or not have in comparison to men. Because just because we have a lot of men in leadership roles, it doesn't mean they have all the right traits as individuals. Because it's not about their gender, it's about them as individuals and their experiences and their set of skills. There isn't a shortage of talented women out there. There isn't a shortage of strong female leaders. There is an abundance of unconscious bias that holds them back. And it starts really early in a woman's career. Very early in her career, that female pool of talent becomes narrowed because the opportunities start narrowing at every level that a woman reaches in her career. So we need to analyze and compare the barriers that exist for women that don't exist for men, and spend our time not on the comparison between the two, but spend our time on how do we solve for the barriers. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Selma. I really appreciate that insight. One of the things I want to highlight is something that you just said. There's no shortage of women in the talent pool. If you can't find a qualified woman, you are not looking in the right place. Now, I spent a lot of time in EEO, a lot of time with affirmative action, a lot of time in outreach. You have qualified candidates out there, cross gender, ethnicity, race. Where are you looking? If you can't find what you're looking for, you're looking in the wrong place. You need to expand where you're looking. There's the Becoming Everything You Are conference. There's the Women of Color conference. There's SHIP. There's SWE. There's so many different opportunities to recruit. You can also do partnerships with your local college campus, for example. If they don't have something similar, like a resource group for genders, ethnicities, etc., help them start one. If you need women welders, go to your local community college and say, hey, can we do some seminars on how much, like what the pay is like, what the opportunities are like for women in welding? Ask the question, make the opportunities. The time is now. So many times people say, I want a better world for my daughter's future. I want that now. I don't want to wait anymore. We have enough talented people out there for roles across the board. And if you say, I need women engineers in a particular type of engineering, and you can't find them, then how about you make the path? Find a way. There is always a solution. You just have to look for it. That's actually something I've tried to instill in my children. I may not know the answer today, but there is a solution, and we all have to find it. We can all work together to do that. So thank you again very much, Selma. And again, in case, for those people in the... Go ahead, yes.
I'm sorry, can I add something? I know we're on schedule here. I just want to I just want to jump in on this, so to Selma's point in regards to, more men being in the industry, et cetera, to your points, Beth, again, the science, the data is out there, that, and actually current or recent events or past events. So one event that I think about all the time, because I did a couple of posts on DEI and AI and all these types of things, and how the biases are built into the coding of these different applications. I'm going to point out Amazon. Everybody's probably heard about this. For about 10 years, Amazon had had an AI program that would scan resumes, and at a very high rate, women resumes were being excluded. For 10 years, this happened. Just about 2 years ago is when they stopped that practice. So it builds on what you just said. It just kind of gives you more proof in that, we have some things that we need to change. Back to you, Beth. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So, okay. So I feel like I need to jump in on that too. My company recently had us do some DEI training, and it was very, Beth, I know you like science, math, statistics, data, research. There was a lot of research cited in this DEI training, and what the recent research has shown is that companies with women in the C-suites and on the board perform significantly. And when I say significantly, it was shocking how much better companies perform with women in the C-suites, women represented on the board, versus companies that have 0 women in the C-suite, 0 women on the board. Across the board, companies perform better with women right at the top, right alongside men. It was fascinating and eye-opening.
Thank you very much, Matt. I I really appreciate that insight. The key, as we all know, or should by now, diversity makes a difference. And it's not just gender, race, ethnicity, it is across the board. Who raised us, where we grew up, everything about us. The more diversity that you can have in your workplace, the more you have a chance to find solutions. And what I'm saying is that we all think differently. Everything that made me makes me think a certain way. The same for my other talented panelist and our talented moderator there. We bring everything with us to the table. So we think about things in a different way. The more people you can have from different diverse backgrounds, the greater chance you have of getting to solutions faster in your workplace. It's just a reality. All right, Matt, I do want to come back to you. Thank you very much for your comments there. What I want you to do is discuss the potential barriers that affect performance.
Well, yeah, thanks. So, performance, when we think performance, we usually think about that personally, my own performance. But, as that DEI training that I took yesterday pointed out, the performance of entire companies is wrapped up in this gender issue. I mean, it's wrapped up in a lot of things, but when you break out the gender issue, you can see huge differences between performances of companies who equitably promote women alongside men. Performance is at stake with this issue. So on an individual level, I have personally seen examples in my career of some of the issues that have been discussed. Earlier we heard about women who are expected to act like men. And that often doesn't go well. And it's when we say act like men, why is there a particular way that we think of men acting? I don't think that that's something that we need to have either. But I have absolutely seen in my workplace women who are negatively perceived because they are direct and what you would have, I think, Beth, you used the term aggressive. They're perceived as aggressive. I've seen it. I have seen men react extremely negatively to that. I've seen I've seen someone actually quit over that issue, and it's it's distressing to see that happening in your own workplace. So, do men and women lead differently? I mean, that's the title of our session, and I'm going to say it. I don't care where it is that you got how you act from. Is it because you're a man? Is it because you're a woman? Is it because of how you were raised? Let's not worry about that, but let's worry about the ways that you lead that does affect performance. One thing that sticks out to me is, do you need to leave your emotions at home when you come to work? And I'm gonna say absolutely not. Success at work is the same as success anywhere, and it is about building successful relationships with clients, with coworkers, with bosses, with direct reports. If you can build successful relationships, you're going to be successful at work. And if that's true across your company is going to be successful. And there are there are things that women bring to the table that have taught me a lot about building successful relationships. I have learned a lot from female colleagues, and I have used those in my interactions with my direct reports to great success. You don't have to be a robot as a boss. Bring your emotions, enter into the emotional life of your employees. And I think, regardless of how it happens, I think women tend to be very good at that. And we need that in the workplace. I need that in my workplace. I've had discussions with women who report to me where I was willing and able to enter into the emotion of the situation. It actually helped come to a resolution. I'm thinking of one woman in particular who, because we had an interaction that was tense and needed, and both of us were willing to enter into the emotions of it and deal with that. We got through it, and she has been promoted twice since then, and dearly loves the workplace. And I just feel like in many places that kind of thing would be shut down. So I think there are differences, but I desperately need what women bring to the table. I want to be sitting in conference rooms that are equitably dispersed between men and women, because we need what each of us brings to the table. So yeah, performance wise, I'm saying I don't want to work in a place where women are not equitably treated, because it's bad for me, it's bad for the company. Back to you, Beth.
Thank you very much, Matt. I appreciate your comments there, especially
Beth,
about
I'd like
the
to add. I'd like to add a little bit to what
Sure.
Matt was saying, and absolutely, being a whole person makes you a better leader. It's so important, though, to have an environment, a working environment where you're allowed to be a whole person, where that is actually promoted, accepted, encouraged. I'll just share a recent experience I had. I recently joined the J&J team at Ethicon a few months ago, and my team is very large. I have over 1,000 people on my team. They're responsible for almost $4 billion of business. And they're an established team that has been in place for a long time and has been successful for a very long time. So when I consulted with my leaders and I asked them, in my first introduction to the team, what are the topics you believe I should cover? The absolute unanimous first thing everyone said is show them pictures of your family and tell them about your family. They want to
Wonderful.
know who you are. And I have never experienced that. In 24 years of my career, I have never worked in a place that asked me to show pictures of my personal life as part of my introduction to a team. And this is a huge team. And I realized that this company actually believes you should bring your whole person to leadership and to work. And they advocate for that and they encourage it. And the message it ultimately sends is if I stand in front of 1,000 people who have a significant responsibility and I tell them that my family is my most important thing in my life, and here they are, and here's why they're important, then what the message I'm telling to each one of those people is I know that the most important thing in your life is your family as well. And that's what we bring first and foremost. And then it's all about driving results.
Great point, Selma. I'm going to jump in on that
Yeah.
tag me in. So I just call that, and not to minimize it, it's very important. That's being your authentic self, being able to bring who you are to the office every day. I think about what you just made me think about, this conversation, this point here. on Netflix, there's a show called White Hot, the fall of Abercrombie and Fitch. If you have not watched it, check it out. In a recent post that I put out there, I took a screenshot of one of the scenes in the documentary. In it, it had a picture from an old employee manual in regards to how you should look, how your hair should be cut. On one side, they had a Caucasian young man, clean cut. Other side, they had a black man with dreadlocks, but they had a big X across. So this is something that they did in that company. So what I'm saying is, that's not bringing your authentic self or being able to bring your authentic self to the workplace. But great point. I just wanted to add that. Back to you, Beth.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your information, for your insights there. When we bring our full selves to work, and that's everything, that's who we are, how we wear our hair. Really think about it. You're selling clothing in a clothing store. What impact would how you wear your hair really have? Anytime, take examples like workplace testing. Do it only if it's relevant. Who are you eliminating if you have a test that really isn't relevant, really isn't necessary? Think about all the people you could eliminate based on your process, your policies, your procedures. If you're eliminating workforce, the talent that you need, eliminate those processes, policies, and procedures. Change them. Doesn't matter if they've been in place 100 years. If they've been in place 100 years, you probably need to dust them off anyway. Thank you very much for pointing that out. If you truly have a safety issue, a real safety issue, then we'll talk about something. But if don't make it up. Don't do it just because we've always done it that way. It's time to change, people. I'm sorry, I'm very passionate, in case you hadn't guessed. The other thing I want to talk about just really briefly is we've talked a little bit about how men perceive women who might be perceived as assertive women. Madeleine Albright once said, "There's a special place in hell for women who don't support other women." I have seen more women get in the way of women than I ever have men. Lift your sisters up, raise them up, support them, give them what they need to succeed. Like, let's take, for example, I said I worked in EEO, that's been my background. Let's take like Bea, for example, or women of color. You're submitting people for awards. If you don't have a person to submit, fine. Tell me what you're doing to help get that person to that level where you can submit them for an award. I don't want to hear, they're not ready. Okay, fine, they're not ready. What are you doing to help them get there? Because there is something that we can all do to reach back and bring somebody ahead with us. And that's what we should be doing. And again, I'm passionate, and that's just me. The other thing I want to talk about is bringing your whole self to work. Your whole self. It's who you are. We can talk about checking our feelings and our emotions at the door, but you know what you've got going on at home. And I love that, Salma, being able to share, who you are with the workforce, because it paints a picture for people. For me, I have an adult son who lives with disabilities. That presents some really interesting challenges on occasion. And sometimes it's a phone call, things that everybody else on the planet might figure out. For him, it can be a challenge. So that challenge sometimes gets relayed to me, because I have to help him figure out something that everybody else his age could certainly do, but he simply cannot. And it might be whether it's, Mom, I just received all this paperwork I have to fill out, for my disability status. And I have to find time to help him do that. And it can weigh on me. It's a part of who I am. It's a part of what I'm bringing into the workforce, because the reality is, we don't turn those things off. We might put them in a little box, But just like a jack in the box, at some point that lid may come off. So we just need to be able to express, to talk, to be who we are. So I want to thank everybody for bringing your passions and your insight to our discussion. Now I want to go back to Ms. Judd. I want you to share some information on the same topic, and what we're looking for is your insight on potential barriers that affect performance.
Sure. I mean, we've spoken about so many. I mean, I'll just make another point on something that you said, Beth, which is women supporting women. So important, but it's a little bit of a which came first. If you're in an organization where there's no room for women, and one woman actually is able to break through that, there can be, a risk to her own insecurity about bringing other women into the fold. And I'm not saying that's the right way to be. I'm just saying the organization created that. For the first time in my entire career, I am working for a woman, and it is extraordinary. I admire everything she does and everything she's done in her career. I've never had an experience like this. And I just think, would I be different had I been exposed to more female leaders through my career? And it's an interesting question that I ask myself, and I have to, focus more on the go forward and learning from it now, because I didn't have that opportunity. And so the women supporting women is so important. There's power in numbers, as they say. And so having those numbers is critical. But we talked about unconscious bias. That is a barrier. Conscious bias is a barrier. Working in an environment or a company that offers training is really important. At J&J, every leader goes through unconscious bias training. And if you don't work in a company that offers unconscious bias training, there are so many resources available online, LinkedIn Learning, but then just there are online training resources too on unconscious bias. That's the first step. The first step is recognizing that. A career track of narrowed opportunity, which we spoke to before, women aren't given the same opportunities along the way, which just means their career track is artificially narrowed, not based on skill set. So what happens there is you have to really challenge yourself to hire based on potential and not based on a given criteria. Because you may have a male candidate and a female candidate, and you may be looking at the male candidate and going, well, he checks all of the boxes of experience that I'm looking for. But if you recognize that that female candidate didn't have the same set of opportunities as the male candidate, then you have to hire based on the potential and how much you're willing to invest of yourself in coaching and developing and mentoring her along the way, because she didn't have those same opportunities to build all of the experiences that would check the box now when she's stack ranked against that male candidate. And then it's the support. It's the right resources, mentorship, sponsorship, just overall recognizing that your female leaders may have unique circumstances that they have to manage personally. They may have unique sets of skills that they need to have leveraged and capitalized on, but then they may have skill gaps that you need to customize the training and the development for them. But you have to be willing to invest in that. And then just recognize that biases exist for your female leaders around her all the time. And so speaking up, acting on those biases, helping remove those barriers for female leaders is really important for their success. And, Jermaine brought this up earlier, is the pandemic. I mean, the pandemic highlighted in real time for us all of the barriers that can exist for women to succeed. And that goes down to role definition, traditional role definitions, split of responsibilities at home, whether you have a partner, don't have a partner, have a caregiver, don't have a caregiver. It applies if you have children, maybe you take care of a parent, whatever your circumstances can be. The pandemic itself brought up a lot of barriers for women. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Selma. That is very true. When it comes to the pandemic, it certainly changed a lot of things. There were a couple of silver linings in it. For me, ADA is one. Let's let an employer say, oh, you can't work from home and see just how far that goes, because the old excuse was, we can't make it happen. We don't know how to do that. And most employers found a way, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to women in the workforce, find ways to raise up to and empower them. Look for those skill gaps, like you just said, Selma. What do people need? Is it training? See that they get it. And another thing I want to address is there's that something you said, Selma, is the woman who's in the workplace. She's been elevated. She has that position that's higher than maybe a woman has ever been before in the organization. And what happens if she brings a woman along behind her? Potential risk there. We should all operate from the mindset, everybody I hire, I want to have the ability, whether training, time, skills assessments, whatever it is they need to be able to replace me and to go higher than me. And if we all take that approach in the workforce with all of our employees, the world will just be a much better place. All right, now I want to go back over to you, Jermaine. I want to hear about potential barriers from your perspective.
Yeah, recently I was having a conversation with a senior cybersecurity leader who happens to be a woman, and we touched on something similar to this. And I asked, "Well, how does this strike you? These things that women are going through in the workplace." And I'll tell you, her response was classic. She goes on to say, "Yep, interesting leaders. Yep, we should all be aware of this so we can lead our organizations, right?" However, her opinion, the real issue is society, and this is what I said at the beginning. More of this, not only in the workplace but also in our society. That's one of the issues in our global society, right? It is automatic or an automatic assumption that women will leave the workforce to stay home. So think about this pandemic, that we talked about with the kids when the crisis occurs, while the husband remains in the workforce. Now, this is something that's been around for generations, right? But she also goes on to say, unless that assumption changes, it will be hard to improve the situation of women leaving the workforce more often than men. Think about that for a moment. There's this built-in, wired into our society in most situations, not all, that it's the woman who will leave work so they can tend to the household. That got me to thinking, that, yeah, you have to consider that there are certain situations at home that may dictate that she has to leave. As someone said earlier, they may not have a partner that can pick up the slack. However, that assumption is still there, Beth. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Jermaine. That assumption is very much still there. I'll give you an example, a couple of different examples, actually. We're going to go back in time when I had my last child. My supervisor, who was a wonderful human being, and I'm sure meant well, thought I was going to be leaving because I had a baby. Surprise, no, I'm not going anywhere. I took her in her little kitty carriers, popped her on my desk when she was about 3 weeks old when I went in just to check up on things. So I just had to basically establish, no, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be a working mom. And for him, it was just, he thought I'd want to leave. And, some people, that is the right thing. That's what they want to do. The key is, what does the woman want? This is something I talk about with Sherpa Institute. It's part of our SDG 8 thought process. What is decent work? Depends on who you are, and it depends on what you want. Maybe it's part-time for some people, maybe it's full-time for others. That answer varies. It's about what the individual wants to do. Another example, sitting in a conference room full of HR people. I said, I worked in HR before. VP of HR asked, who wants to go somewhere for an opportunity? We're talking about different opportunities. Well, I raised my hand and I said, hey, I'll move for an opportunity. And the question back was, well, what will your husband say about that? And I remember asking, would you ask a man the same question? The conference room was a little bit silent for a few seconds while he thought about it, and he said, you're right, I probably wouldn't ask that. And I ended up with a promotion. And yes, it did require a short notice move, but I was very happy with that. It really helped my career. So it's one of those, what does the person want? That's the key to it. And it's a different answer for everybody. What I'd like to do now is, let's see, our next question is going to the entire team. I want to remind our audience that QR code is now in your upper right-hand corner. If you have questions, please put questions in there. We are at 2:11, so we're rapidly approaching our 2:25 end time. Next question goes to our entire team. What I want you to do is provide insight for methods for improving organizational performance through a better leadership style. We're going to begin with you, Matt. Matt, did you
So, when it comes to leadership styles, I just absolutely believe that there is not a corner on any leadership style based on gender. I have seen the same styles exhibited by both men and women. And I think this should not be a gender issue when it comes to leadership style. There may be some of that based on societal expectations and upbringing based on gender. But what I've found, and my company does a very good job of teaching different styles and teaching when it is appropriate to display different styles, because every style is in certain situations and incredibly ineffective in certain situations. And so, I have a naturally very supportive but hands-off style. I don't look over people's shoulders. I trust my people to do their work. But there are times when I need to not use that style. I need to use a more assertive style at times. And those styles can be learned. And that's what my company teaches us. You can learn those other styles, put them in your tool belt, and pull them out when appropriate. And I absolutely believe that that's true, regardless of men, women, gender differences. Everybody can have different styles in their tool belt and pull them out when appropriate. And, using inappropriate styles leads to unhappy employees, and it leads to unproductive work environments. And if you work for a company that doesn't understand the differences in styles and when they're appropriate and doesn't teach that, you need to bring that issue up with your company, because it's going to lead to unhappy workers who are inappropriately supervised. So as far as I'm concerned, anybody can exhibit any style of leadership if they are taught how to do that, and can learn how to use their own natural style very, very well to produce a very successful team. Back to you, Beth.
Thank you very much, Matt. I really appreciate that. I want to highlight one thing that you said, and it's basically people can be taught leadership styles. Think about those organizations. Sometimes they'll have like a dual track. One's a management track per se, one is a technical track. You're not really in a true leadership role if you stay on the technical side. Something to think about when you promote the person, when you put them in a managerial position and they're now supervising people. What do you do with them? Do you give them training? Maybe you should start training them before you put them in the role. Maybe a little bit of that training, it probably wouldn't hurt if the whole workforce had some of it. Just how to treat people with dignity and respect. And then again, when you're getting ready to promote someone, when you're getting ready to put somebody in a managerial role, what do you do with them before they start managing people? Just something to think about. Okay. All right. Next up, Jermaine, please.
Thank you,
But I'd
Beth.
like. Okay.
Oh, thank you. I'm so eager to jump in, right?
Go right ahead.
I always say this, to me, when it comes to this topic related to anything diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's all about the leadership mindset, because that's the foundational piece for any organization. If the mindset is there at the very top of the organization, your organization will flourish in that regard, right? And if you don't have the foundations in place, your organization just will not flourish. If you look at it from an analogy perspective, if there's a road that needs to be built in a rural area, and if those engineers do not follow the regulations, the rules, they don't get that foundation in place so that you can have smooth sailing through that area, you're going to be on a bumpy road. I feel the same way when it comes to leadership and how you operate in your organizations. The other thing I'd like to point out is you have to listen to your employees. Yes, more and more companies are doing this because of what's been happening in the last few years. More companies still need to do that. Listen to your employees. Understand what's going on. Understand why are they different? How are they different? Embrace those differences, right? And as Beth said at the very beginning, we all have unconscious bias. We all have bias. It's just how we're wired. Our brain is wired that way. Okay. But it doesn't make you a bad person. All right. And lastly, I think there should be more compassion when it comes to leadership style. As we've touched upon, women leaders tend to have better results. They also tend to have higher retention rates. Okay. So I feel across the board, as Matt has said, it shouldn't be gender specific. There should be more compassion when it comes to the leadership style. Thank you, Beth. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Jermaine. That's one of the things that sometimes we miss, compassion in the workplace. Sometimes it's all about the shareholder profits, the bottom line. Well, if you think about it, the more you take care of your people, the better that bottom line is probably going to get. The more productive people are going to be when they can bring their whole selves to work. They're happy people. Happy people tend to produce more for you. People who are treated well tend to do more for you. Now over to you, Selma, if you would talk about leadership styles.
Well, I think one of the themes out of all the comments has been it really depends on where you work. And unfortunately, there are some people on this seminar right now that don't have a choice about where they work. If you have a choice, or if you're about to make that choice, choose carefully. Factor in a lot of what we had a discussion about today into your choice. If you don't have a choice, I hope that you can be the change at your organization and you can help implement some of the things that are needed for different leadership styles to thrive. ERGs is a great way. Where I work, ERGs, employee resource groups. Where I work at J&J, there's 12 ERGs. So there's 12 different groups. They have 240 chapters. There's over 20,000 members globally involved in the ERGs. We have a women's leadership and inclusion ERG, as well as many others. And the focus really is to create a place where you can have a sense of belonging and you can make a difference and you can develop and it can be a safe space for you. And sometimes the training and resourcing is customized for that particular ERG group's needs, that group's needs. And so working in the right environment is really important. We also do, as I mentioned earlier, unconscious bias training for all of our leaders, because that's at the root of a lot of what we're talking about. Any company's diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies and initiatives will fail if they are not working to remove unconscious bias. And so it depends on where you work. If you have a choice, choose based on a lot of the things that we talked about today. If you don't have a choice, see if you can implement some of the things in your own company, get a group to rally with you, and create an environment where different leadership styles can thrive.
Selma, thank you so much for that insight. Let me talk about ERGs for just one moment. If you have a women's professional group, one of your ERGs in your workplace, can someone who identifies as a man join it? For those who don't know, yes. And you know something else? They should. They absolutely should. Resource groups are meant to help promote, to help raise up individuals within that group, and they need everyone's support to be a part of that mission, part of the vision, part of moving whatever that representative group is ahead. So men, by all means, should join a women's group and be part of that support. Raise the voice, it's needed. Sometimes that's the support that can make all the difference in an organization. Now we are getting ready here. We're at 2:23. We have a couple of minutes for questions. Again, that QR code is in the top right corner. We have some questions that we can go to and have brought up for us. Waiting for the questions. I understand that we have some forthcoming. All right, one more. Oh, how do you overcome gender differences? Selma, would you like to take that one?
Sure. Just based on some of the things we talked about today, I don't think you should be working to overcome gender differences. I think you should be first questioning why there's a different perception based on gender, and working to remove the perceptions and the biases that cause us to perceive men and women differently. And then when there are positive differences, you should absolutely be capitalizing and leveraging on those differences based on the leadership situation and what's needed.
Jermaine?
Well, as far as overcoming gender differences, Selma said it very well, and we've been talking about this. I mean, there's so many resources out there to help you to educate yourself, to understand. This is both sides of the table. This is leadership. This as well as your staff. Understanding that because I'm a man, I get the promotion versus a woman. No, that's not fair. That's not equitable. But I think education, discussion, communication are all important to overcoming gender differences in the workplace.
Well, I want to thank both Salma and Jermaine here. We lost Matt a few minutes ago. Sometimes we have technical difficulties in our virtual worlds. These things happen. For the audience, what you need to do is there is a URL on the session list. It's on the platform for you. We're going to go over to Shindig. My team and I are going to go over there, and we'll meet you there so we can continue the conversation. So thank you very much, Jermaine, Selma, for taking part. Thanks to our audience for attending. We'll see you on Shindig in a moment. All right, thank you.